Hey everyone, welcome. It's Baron, and this is going to be my brief review and reaction to the semi-surprising news from what was overnight for me, that GGG released all of the Ascendancy nodes for the upcoming Path of Exile 2 open access release on Friday, December 6th. This was requested in an interview with Zizarin early in the week, and it looks like they were like, okay, we'll do it. And unfortunately, this is take two of the video for me. I had intended to do this completely blind and just go through and you see my initial reactions to each of these. And unfortunately, I had microphone issues and it was completely without sound. So regrettably, I have to do another version of this video. It will still be off the cuff. I don't have a script. You're going to see why. I normally do have a script for videos like this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this stopwatch up here to keep me honest. I'm going to try and do around a couple minutes per Ascendancy, and I guess my thoughts will be a little bit better organized because I've already seen these nodes once before. So with that, let's dive in, and I'll start the stopwatch. Starting with the Stormweaver, and I hope I'm zoomed in enough here, but we knew several of these nodes already. Some of the new ones look like basically the Elementalist. So it appears that the Elementalist has basically been split off between the Stormweaver and the Infernalist. So Stormweaver got the lightning and the cold side of it. So we get exposure lowering even further, which is a very Elementalist thing. Elemental Storm is just looks like generic added damage here of fire, cold, or lightning, depending on what damage you did. And then you've got a node, Rain Dancer, which increases the cooldown recovery rate of Rain Dancer, which basically means it's just increasing the damage by, like 50%, it looks like, because it's triggering more often. It's a triggered spell. I joked in my first recording that Heavy Snows here is going to be the target of even more memes. So Strike Twice, shock can be affected by two shocks at the same time, was the subject of some Reddit memes about Office Space. Two chicks at the same time, two chills at the same time sounds even more like that. But yeah. So this is kind of a fusion between Elementalist, and I think the Warden works a little bit like this, where you can inflict multiple elemental ailments. But I think some of the interesting things that we hadn't seen before are down here. So you have Arcane Surge at all times if you take number 8 Constant Gale here. And in a game where mana regen is going to be so crucial, getting 20% more mana regen at all times I think is going to be big. Plus, you get increased effective Arcane Surge if you take number 9 per maximum mana, which has a very Hierophant feel to it. So that's like the third Path of Exile 1 Ascendancy that kind of feels like it's been tossed in all together here, but that does encourage some mana stacking with this Ascendancy. And then this right here, Heart of the Storm, this is just another really good node. 40% of elemental damage taken recouped as energy shield. That's just good. That's just strong. Let's reset the timer and move on. Next up is the Chronomancer. So again, several of these we knew. Time Snap, we still need to know if Time Snap is itself a skill that has a cooldown, and if so, what that cooldown is, or is this gated in some other way? Like maybe it has a hideously high mana cost or something like that. But the ability to reset cooldowns of other skills is big. And you've also got this here, skills have a 35% chance not to consume a cooldown when used, which seems particularly valuable for skills that have like 2 to 4 cooldown uses. This might let you use them more smoothly. Temporal Rift is the same as it was in Path of Exile 1. I don't think that I personally have a big enough brain to to be a good pilot for a build that uses Temporal Rift, that teleports you back to where you were recently and resets your mana, life, energy shield. It seems like this has the potential to do something strong. I'm not smart enough to know what that is or how I would use it. This one, Quicksand Hourglass, I'm sorry, I think this is powerful and I just really dislike it. Every 12 seconds, gain 50% more cast speed for 4 seconds. I really dislike cycling buffs, whether they're offensive or defensive. I don't like having to plan my game around something that's not in my control. I have to wait for another 8 seconds or whatever to get my cast speed. Just not a fan. Enemies in presence are slowed by 20%. That is generically good. 30% damage taken recouped as life. Also very good and kind of matches the energy shield recoup from the Stormweaver. This one's interesting. Recoup effects instead occur over 4 seconds. I might be misremembering, but I thought in Path of Exile 1 the default was 4 seconds and that you could lower it with certain means that looked like this, but you would lower it to like 3 seconds. I might be misremembering, but in any case, this is clearly intended as a buff. So however good recoup is normally, this will make it better. So we can move on now. This is the Titan, and much of this we already knew. I think actually all of this had been leaked one way or another, but here's the interesting thing that I want to draw your attention to. Generic bonk, yes. So this is definitely a class where you get a big stick, you get a big slam skill, and you hit enemies a lot with it. You're tanky from more armor, you're tanky from more life, although I think that 15% value is lower. I think originally it was 20% more life. It's still very good. But here's what I want to draw your attention to. A lot of the reviews of this have said, a chest which adds 20 inventory slots, it's the equivalent of like the rucksack from the old Wildwood Ascendancies in Path of Exile 1, except those were on top of your normal Ascendancy. It didn't feel too bad to waste a point on it. Here, people have been reviewing this and saying, it's great, I love it, but I can't waste an Ascendancy point on that. Let me point something out here. Number 5 is gated behind number 4 here. So here's my prediction, what I think could happen. I think people might decide that to sack probably strength for this build, 50% increase effect of small passive skills, plus all the small passive skills that lead up to your notables, people might go, geez, 50% increased effect, that's pretty good. I want that. That might be worth taking a useless Ascendancy node for. I think people might take this at the cost of getting the 20 inventory slots and then be like, oh, this is nice. I don't think I can go back. Like, I'm picturing this happening to me where I take this because I have to, and then I'm like, ooh, 20 extra slots is really good. How do I go back to a normal character now? So that's just kind of my fun prediction, but I definitely think that the increased effect of small passive skills, that's interesting and potentially very effective. So we'll have to see. Let's reset the timer and move on. Moving on to Warbringer. That's the name of it, right? Yeah, Warbringer. Again, some of these we knew, but this stuff is new. Break armor equal to 10% of hit damage dealt, and you can break enemy armor to below 0. So that's kind of like elemental resistance penetration, except for physical damage. That's interesting. Jade Heritage, I kind of gathered this from watching the video of them using it, and I don't like this as a defensive buff particularly. We may find that this feels different in Path of Exile 2 because the combat flows differently, but this causes you to need to stand still completely, and you can't perform any actions in order to absorb this damage. So yes, it's a great oh shit button to like recover your health or whatever, but I don't like, Replica Rumi's Concoction in Path of Exile 1 causes you to be petrified in place to get a sizable defensive boost. I just don't know, man. We'll have to see how it plays in practice, but I'm not sure I like it. We already knew about Answered Call. It's just generically making your totems better. It's just the part that we didn't know, I think, or at least I didn't know, is that it does so. The spirit that it summons is considered a minion, and that's interesting. Like, do you try to scale minion damage with that? I don't know, but it is interesting that it is considered a minion. 20% of damage from hits taken from nearest totem's life. That's an effect we're familiar with from Path of Exile 1. That is very good. That's good defense. Renly's training, Renly Baratheon, Game of Thrones. But this is very similar. It's basically a version of the new Gladiator node from Path of Exile 1. It's a little weaker, 40% instead of 50%. But it seems, given what we've seen of the block numbers so far in Path of Exile 2, this seems strong, that you're getting 40% base chance to block. This enables you to use a shield that doesn't have modifiers dedicated to raising the block on it. You can use your shield for other things instead. So we'll see. Turtle Charm is very interesting. So I'm interpreting this 35% less block chance. I'm interpreting that to be even more of a drawback than it looks like. I don't think that is going to subtract 35% from your block chance where you could just overcap it. I think that's multiplying it by like 0.65 or whatever. Like, I think that's going to be way harder to handle. But the ability to block damage from all hits while shield is not raised, I assume that means that we don't expend the endurance bar, although if we do, that makes us pretty weak. But also, all hits, does that include the normally unblockable stuff? If so, that's really big. That would be really big if this included unblockable stuff. So we'll have to see, but let's reset and move on for now. Moving on to the Deadeye. So a lot of stuff we knew. No accuracy penalty at a distance. Benefits from consuming frenzy charges have a chance to be doubled because that's what frenzy charges do now. They get consumed. They don't have any active effects. I like this business. We're going to see more of 4A and 4B. So it's the same node that you choose from, and you choose whether you want to have point blank or far shot, which are effects that we are familiar with from Path of Exile 1. You choose whether you want to deal more damage up close or far away. That's nice. Additional projectile, that's, it's nerfed from Path of Exile 1, but still seems very good. Additional mark seems very strong. Now, this is where things get interesting. We should have been able to infer before now from the phrasing lose all tailwind when hit, but I didn't personally. I didn't put 2 and 2 together that this means that tailwind is no longer a binary buff the way it was in Path of Exile 1, where you just either have it or you don't. It is a stacking buff that goes up to 10. So that is reminiscent of how the Deadeye worked before, but now tailwind in general as a thing has 10 stacks, and each stack of it increases movement speed and skill speed, which is interesting. Tailwind used to increase just overall generic action speed, which was an umbrella term that included movement speed, attack speed, cast speed, everything. So it seems like they've split this out into movement speed and skill speed, which I'm guessing still encompasses the speed of attacking and casting. Maybe it includes cooldown as well. We don't know. In game, we'll be able to hover over this. There will be nested hovering, so you could like hover over tailwind to get this pop-up box, and then hover over skill speed to get another one, which I think is very cool. But we don't have it here. Remains to be seen exactly how strong this is. I expect that they probably changed this from action speed for like coding reasons. It's probably easier to code, I guess. But it also does give us increased evasion rating per stack, which is great. But we know that we lose tailwind when hit. So this is really leaning into that old like Kintsugi, Wind Dancer, Wind Ward feeling of you build up a bunch of defense and you're very unlikely to get hit, but if you do, you kind of reset and you have to build it back up again. So it kind of leans into that play style. Let's move on though. Pathfinder. So we knew that we were going to have a choice of all these different flasks. There's no surprises here. There's poison, bleeding, and the 3 main elements, each of which inflict either exposure or ailments with increased effect. That's all good. More flask charges gained, so that's a ton more flask charges. But this is weaker now that there are no utility flasks. Actually, take that back. I'm realizing now, I think the phrasing of the charms says that it does function on flask charges. So I think the Pathfinder is actually going to be a better user of charms, if I'm right about that. Like, you would gain flask charges that count towards the charms. That's great. And then also this one we're familiar with from Path of Exile 1. Life flask effects not removed when life is full, and life flasks don't queue. So this lives and dies based on how long a life flask is typically active for. If a life flask is going to be active for 2 seconds, this sucks. If it's going to be active for 10 seconds, this is amazing. You can just occasionally re-up it and get a huge amount of regen. We knew about the 2 poison nodes, so this is just going to make Pathfinder the kind of default poison ascendancy in a lot of cases. But then coming down here, Traveler's Wisdom. This is what some of us kind of raised our eyebrow and thought, wait, maybe for the Witchhunter node, which we're going to see down in a minute, but the Witchhunter released with an Ascendancy notable that said, grants 20 weapon passive skill points. And we were like, does that really mean that you get 20 passive skill points? And no, it didn't. We kind of figured that it wouldn't, but what it actually meant was that 20 of your normal passive skill points are transformed into weapon passive skill points so that you can swap between 2 different skill trees with 2 different weapons, 2 different skills, and it all happens automatically. So you say, oh, here's my skill tree for when I'm firing crossbows, and here's my skill tree for when I'm firing grenades, or whatever. That's not what that node did. It is, however, what this node does. It actually grants just 5 passive skill points straight up. Now, it's clearly not 20, not as many. It kind of gives me the old Scion Ascendant vibe from Path of Exile 1, that you spend an Ascendancy notable to get more passive skill points. And this is something that you would do to just, if you just had a generically good, I keep using that phrase, but it's, if you just had a build that had nothing to do with the other stuff Pathfinder did, you just needed some extra points, maybe you would default to Pathfinder. Like, you just wanted to be fast, so you take, 6 and 7, maybe 8, and you could get the flask charges and utility, the charms. And so, like, that could be a plug and play for a lot of different kinds of builds. But let's go ahead and move on, try to keep this under 3 minutes per. A lot of big stuff with this one. This is a big, important change, and the Blood Mage Ascendancy is now looking strong. So, Sanguimancy, this was a crucial thing that we needed to know about it, and it is true. It's not just when you kill enemies. If you critically hit a target, you will get a life remnant. This was crucial because these life remnants are what grants you life overflow, and your whole ascendancy depends on having life overflow. All of your points here, this doesn't say increase critical damage per maximum life, it just says per life. So when you overflow your life, you're getting more critical damage bonus. Yeah, I guess that's really the main one, but like that's crucial. We needed to know that you're gonna have both the offense and the defense during boss fights, as long as you can critically strike, and you'll be able to critically strike because you have Sunder the Flesh, a very powerful node that makes your base crit chance for spells 15%. This is like Sandstorm Visage built into an Ascendancy node. You can pick a skill that has a terribly low base crit chance, like Hex Blast was in Path of Exile 1, and you can still get an amazing critical strike chance with it here. Don't really know how to assess curses have infinite duration. It's a standalone one, so you don't have to take it to get anywhere. So this would have to be very good to want to take it, and I'm not sure if it is. But just to wrap up here, 25% of life loss from hits is prevented, then life is lost over 4 seconds instead. So that's Progenesis as an Ascendancy node. That seems really strong, especially in a class that we already know is going to want to stack life regen to the moon. So yeah, that seems like a very good defensive layer. And then gain energy shield from equipped body armor as extra maximum life. And that's interesting because it doesn't replace the energy shield with life, so you still get it. I just don't know if this build cares as much about the energy shield itself. This build may be happy to be like, yeah, whatever. Like, I get hit, I lose my 400 energy shield or whatever it is. I don't care about regenerating, leeching, recovering that. I really took the body armor to get like a big chunk of extra maximum life, base life. But we'll see. I don't know. Maybe there will be a fusion hybrid energy shield life version of this. I don't know. So let's go ahead and move on to the Infernalist, which again we already knew some things about. I wanted to draw your attention to this because I misread it the first time that I looked at it. But 20% of cold and lightning damage taken as fire, and then 20% of fizz damage taken as chaos. So in a way, this starts to lean into the idea of, with Pyromantic Pact, with Infernal Flame, you're going to be blowing yourself up if you're not careful, or maybe you just plan on blowing yourself up by spending your skills over a short period of time. So you could build maximum fire resistance and just say, like, I don't care if I get blown up, I have 90 fire resistance, it doesn't matter. And then this would lean into that you would not need to necessarily stack cold and lightning damage, or rather cold and lightning max resist. You could just convert some of it to fire, which you've got raised resist of. This last part is interesting though. Fizz taken as chaos. This seems to make you want to do a chaos inoculation build to just delete that 20% of fizz damage. But if you look at the other things that this Ascendancy does, I don't know, you might not want to do that, or you might only want to do it with some versions of the build. So you need to take this fizz as chaos in order to get to 2, 3, and 4. But if you look, 2, 3, and 4 here are all reserving your life, which you can't do if you take Chaos Inoculation. And they have some pretty potent effects. So you kind of have to choose. Like, do you just get your Chaos res up another way? Or do you take 2 as a standalone, you make this a Chaos Inoculation build, and then you use your other points on other things? Maybe. But just to discuss these other effects very quickly, gaining spirit by reserving life, very powerful effect, has that old feel of like arrogance from Path of Exile 1, that you get more auras, or in this case minions, by reserving your life. You can reserve even more life to get mana, so that this Bedot's Gaze kind of leans you into like a mind over matter play style. You're like, I don't care if I'm reserving my life, that just means more minions, more auras, and I'll use mana as my main health pool. But if you do that, then you wouldn't want to take Pyromantic Pact, because mind over matter is not going to work with Pyromantic Pact. So yeah, the more I look at this, the more this seems like there are 2 or 3 like distinct styles of play that you could choose for the Infernalist, and they're all kind of mutually exclusive with one another. And Seething Body, just good damage, just, as long as you've got high Infernal Flame, which you're going to be trying to do with a build like this, you'll get a bunch of extra damage. Grinning Immolation, very interesting. High cost, high reward here. So become ignited when you deal a critical hit. You take a bunch of your life and energy shield as fire damage per second. You can ameliorate that with high fire resistance, or I don't know, maybe there's a way to become ignite immune altogether. But in return, you get 30% more critical damage bonus. And am I reading this right? Is this like I was talking about with the less block chance before? Is this 30% on top of it, or is this times 1.3, which would be way stronger. So we'll have to see about that. But let's go ahead and move on. I'm taking too long with this one. Moving on to Witchhunter, I appreciate that they have included the word become in Weapon Master, so this is the point of confusion I mentioned earlier. 20 passive skill points become weapon set skill points. Makes sense. Pitiless Killer, Culling Strike, we already knew about this, and in fact all of these nodes have been leaked at some point, but just wanted to draw your attention to Culling Strike can be improved by nodes on the tree and perhaps elsewhere. You can improve the percentage of life at which enemies are called. So that could be better than it looks. And I'm actually not going to go over the rest of these too much, other than to note explosions are very good, and Sorcery Ward I am not sold on. I'm very not sold on this 6-7 line right here. The Sorcery Ward, 50% less armor and evasion. Sorcery Ward only reduces elemental damage. I don't know, man. Dicey. Let's move on. Let's talk Gemling Legionnaire, and I was looking forward to getting the full set of passes for this one, and we've got it. They changed the quality one a little bit, maybe just for aesthetic reasons. It was 12, now it's 10. That doesn't seem like a huge balance change. It just looks prettier, but what do I know? Maybe that extra 2% was doing something. And so, okay, just overall, my take on this is my original take was correct, is that this is going to be a very flexible kind of ascendancy that you can slot a ton of different kinds of builds into, but it's weird in a good way. It's very weird in a very good way. Plus level of all skills is very good. Less cost of skills and more attribute requirements, but that downside of more attribute requirements is kind of handled by attribute requirements of gems can be satisfied by your highest attributes. So this kind of leans into maybe like an attribute stacking kind of a build. I don't know. Grants 3 extra skill slots, and this is made even better by the fact that those extra skill slots can have more support gems, which is going to lead to more maximum resistance. So this is a very potent defensive layer. We did not have gem studded before. You can use 2 copies of the same support gem in different skills. That seems like it's going to be very important for a wide variety of builds. And then inherent bonuses from intelligence, strength, and dexterity are doubled. Yeah, stacking. Attribute stacking build. Just there's so many possibilities with this. I don't know what we're going to end up doing with it, but it seems very cool. Let's reset and move on. The Invoker. This is another one that I was very much looking forward to, and I'm very glad that we've got this all now, because I'm thinking that I might start with Invoker, and we are now learning that there is let me put it this way. If somebody like Jungroin makes a meme auto casting build of some kind, it's going to be with the Invoker. I'm pretty sure. Why? Number one, you can get a ton more spirit based on, and so spirit ability to reserve not just buffs, but ability to reserve meta gems, things that can automatically cast things for you. You can get additional spirit to reserve stuff from your body armor by having enough energy shield or evasion on there. And also with the Soul Springs Eternal, meta skills gain energy faster, a third faster, which is substantial. So if there is some line in the sand, some threshold that you have to reach in order to go critical, or in order to reach critical mass where you can somehow self-sustain energy being gained, I don't know whether it's going to be possible. GGG may have coded the game so that you're not going to be able to do that, but if it's possible to kind of go infinite, you're going to do it as the monk, because this makes your meta skills activate much more quickly. So Jungroin, what you got, man? But other good things going on with this ascendancy. Meditate. This is indeed just it's the same kind of overcharge that you get from Sanguimancy, from the Blood Mage, except it is energy shield. The important thing that I wanted to note about this that's very cool is that you don't have to wait until you dip back below 100% of your mana to keep overcharging it back to double, right? So you ever played a shooter game where you've got a big clip of like 100 bullets and you shoot 5 of them and you're like, oh my god, I've got to reload? This will let you do that with your energy shield if you want. You don't have to, but if you have 4,000 max energy shield and you get knocked down, or you have 4,000 max, you double it to 8,000 and you get knocked down to like 7,500. And you're like, I can't have 7,500, I need to have 8,000. Yes, you can sit and you can channel it back up to 8,000. You're allowed to do that. So that's cool. Unbound Avatar, we still don't know enough about yet. We need to see whether Unbound Avatar exactly mimics the version of it that the Warden gets in Path of Exile 1, or if the numbers have been nerfed slightly, which wouldn't surprise me. We've got Sunder My Enemies, which is basically the Inquisitor node from Path of Exile 1, except it actually has the benefit of saying ignore non-negative enemy monster elemental resistances. So you don't have to necessarily ignore things like curses or whatever when you take this, the way you would with Inquisitor. You get the benefit of ignoring elemental resistances if they're positive, but you don't get the drawback of ignoring them if they're negative. So that's good. So let's go ahead and move on. And the Acolyte of Chayula, the other one that I was really looking forward to learning more about. And let me tell you, when I first, in my first recording of this video, when I first saw reality rending, I was thrilled, and I still am, and I want to tell you why. So this immediately, I said to myself, like, this looks familiar. Why does that effect look familiar? Oh yeah, it's just like the Atlas passive tree, where you get those kind of increasing effect of breach. Yes, yes. So Acolyte of Chayula is a breach-focused ascendancy, and I love the flavor of this, where this kind of decreasing chance to do an increasing buff is something that you saw on the Atlas passive tree for breach in Path of Exile 1. So I don't know, like, that doesn't have any like in-game impact, although it does seem strong. I like that, but like, I just like that they decided to do the same type of effect. So like, GGG, I see you, man. I appreciate you. Whoever made that design decision, that's cute. I like it. What I'm less sure about, though, is the Into the Breach Waking Dream thing. This business of you've got these flames that pop up around you that you can walk over, and you get these benefits, right? Like you get life leech, mana leech, a damage buff. Those are great. We'll have to see how it feels in practice to actually have to like walk around and get these things in order to get the buffs. Will that feel tedious? I don't know. But if it doesn't feel tedious, these will provide some substantial buffs. The only other thing that I wanted to know going into seeing these final nodes for the Acolyte of Chayula, so look, I've done a little bit of theory crafting around Embrace the Darkness, Grasp of the Void, and like Mind Over Matter to try and have maximum darkness at all times, get a bunch of extra damage, and then have the darkness as kind of like a secondary defensive layer beneath your mana if you needed it. So what I was wondering was there going to be another node like Grasp of the Void that offered you extra damage if you leaned into the darkness thing? And the answer is no. So Inner Silence is a node that you would take if you wanted to actually use darkness as a routine defensive layer. You recover it far more quickly this way. But with the kind of theory crafting shenanigans that I was doing, you wouldn't care about this too much because you wouldn't want to be reserving darkness almost ever. You would want it just there to enhance Grasp of the Void. And I don't know if Grasp of the Void is going to be enough by itself to warrant that. So 1% as extra chaos damage for every 20 unreserved unreserved darkness. You get 5 maximum darkness per level. So you get 500 plus 1 is 600 divided by 20 here is 30. So if you're at maximum darkness and level 100, 30% damage as extra chaos, like, that's okay. That's okay. But is it worth removing all your spirit and not being able to have buffs? I assume that darkness cannot be reserved to give a buff, and even if it could, would you want to do it if you were taking this? So I don't know. This may not be as strong as I'd kind of hoped, but there's still a lot of fun things going on here. You've still got the instant mana leech. You've got this reality rending, which again, very cute, very nice. You'd want to use this with a fast-hitting attack of some kind so that you can get the benefit of this smoothed out over the course of your many attacks. But yeah, that is it. Those are the 12 that we are launching with. So I had a lot of fun looking at these. I'm definitely still thinking of the Invoker, but I've got a lot of other ideas for other builds now too. Maybe I'll throw some videos up of just some generic, of some ideas that I've got for some of these classes. But yeah, it was fun going through these and taking a look at these with you. I'm looking forward to the launch on Friday. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, and take it easy.